Today we're going to look at a really basic drawing technique, and if it doesn't change your life, it will at least change your drawing practice. I can't wait to share it with you. Thanks for joining me today. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel we do all things watercolour, as well as drawing techniques, a little bit of mixed media, even some business and motivation for artists too. If that's your sort of thing, please do subscribe. So let's get on with today's drawing video. So a few months ago on YouTube, somebody said to me, Michelle, can you please demonstrate the envelope drawing technique? And I said, oh yes, no problem at all. And then I'm just like, what? And I just started thinking, why have I not heard of this? So I Googled it and I found that I'd been doing it for years. I just hadn't ever called it the envelope technique. So basically, not to clickbait you, it's the idea of putting a sort of a box or at least a square-sided shape around the thing that you're drawing. It works best for things that aren't too huge. So it's fantastic for people. In fact, that's what I use it for most often, for people and for flowers. It could be used for maybe a smaller building. It's not much good for things like large landscapes and expansive seascapes. We'll use different techniques for those. But anywhere you've got a particular item or object, especially anything that's foreshortened and that you're finding really hard to get your head around, a person, a car, an animal, even still life and botanical objects, this drawing technique will change your life. So I'm not going to just show it to you once. It's pretty easy to understand. I'm going to actually break it down into different subjects and give you some examples of how I use it to get my drawings much more accurate. And more importantly, to override my brain, because your eyes every day process huge amounts of data and information, and we send signals to our brain and we have to make them smaller. So we have to sort of skip things. We have to make things more simple to understand. So all we really need to know is, am I going to bump into it? Can I eat it? Is it going to hurt me? Is this person a member of my tribe? Is it somebody I know? So we take this huge amount of data and we boil it down to small, easy to understand things. But that doesn't really help us when we're trying to draw something in detail. We also have fixed ideas of how things look. So we know how people look, we know how buildings look, and our idea of how these things look is usually in a straight on perspective. A person would be standing up in a straight line with arms and legs. Doesn't really help us if we have to draw someone that's, for instance, jumping through the air or curled up in a ball. Doesn't help us too much if something is at an extreme perspective, if a car is coming towards us instead of side on. And this is where this envelope technique will help us. So let's get started. I'm going to start with my personal nemesis, which is cars. So let's look at this technique, and before I start, let me tell you about what I'm using to draw with. Now, these are not things that you will be drawing with. I've got a black coloured pencil here, and I've also got a ballpoint pen. Now, the reason I'm using these is because when I use a standard graphite pencil, you all tell me you can't see properly. So I'm just using these dark, scruffy things so that you can see. We're not going to be doing finished drawings here today. We're just looking at layout and getting things the right size and the right shape. Now, when you use a photograph, you want to make sure that you keep it level so you can line it up with the base or the top of your paper or the side. Even if you've got it off to one side, what you don't want is to be drawing with it at an angle like this. And what we're looking for is a box or an envelope to enclose this car in. So it's not necessarily 4 straight lines. It could be 3 or it could be 7 or 8. We're looking at these angles here. Now, what these do is they remain the same no matter how big or small this is. So this is really, really helpful, this technique. What we can do is we can plot an angle from there to there. And I say plot, I mean approximate. And that angle will remain the same between the top of the car and the front corner of the car. If I draw this at 2 inches high or if I draw it 3 foot high, that angle remains the same. That's why this envelope technique is going to help us so much. So some of the time when I'm drawing, the photo will be off of the paper. I'll keep it in camera as much as I can. But if I have the camera too high, then it stops you from being able to see very well. So let's think about what we've got here. Straight away we can see we've almost got like a box shape here. So we've got an angle here and then an angle here. And they sort of go that way a little bit because of perspective. In other words, it's sort of wedge shapes. It's wider this side than this side. So let's start there. So we're thinking about starting with a shape that goes up like this and a shape at the front here that goes the other way a little bit. And then I've got this shape here, and again we come down here. So I've got a shape that comes here, and then at the back here I've got another angle that comes down here and one that comes in. We've got something like this going on. We've also got this angle here between front and back tyres, which is really quite short. So I've got something like this. The angle I've drawn at the base here is actually between the tyres, not the actual car itself, but it's giving me a starting point. So I've got this kind of rough shape here. So what I can do now is I can start using that as sort of a guideline to where I'm going to actually place everything. Now, of course, I would usually be using graphite pencil, which gives me the opportunity of erasing if something's wrong. And believe me, cars are not my strong suit. Really quite tricky, aren't they, cars and boats? But we can see that having got this, this guideline here, this guideline shape, it's enabling me to get started on the shape of the car. Now, you might not necessarily get it right first time. You might need to make adjustments as you go along. And that's okay because, as I said, you won't be working in ballpoint pen like me. But straight away, it's giving you an area on the paper in which to place your car and to get started. So let's have a look at something I'm a little bit more at home drawing, and that is birds. Now, this technique can be used for all sorts of animals, cats, dogs, wild animals, anything. But since I love to paint birds and they are a popular painting subject, let's look now at how we can use this technique for something a little bit more natural and a little bit less man-made. So let's look at something that's got a much more simple shape. There's a strong sense of the triangle about this one, isn't there? So I can place my pencil in a straight edge and see that it's pretty much straight along the bottom, perhaps slightly up to the left. So I can start with a long line like this. And then we've got this strong angle here. And again, if I hold this level with my paper and then I do this, I can get a really good idea of the angle of this coming right up like so. And then what about this one here? Sort of comes round almost in a curve, doesn't it? You want to get most of these lines as straight as possible, but it doesn't hurt to have a slight curve if you need one, and I really feel like we do here. This enables us to get started. Now, something I'd be looking at next would be a halfway point between here and here. So I'm looking at this head here and seeing that the edge of the head is less than halfway across. So I'm going to find a point here that's less than halfway across. I'm working quite small here, and straight away we start to get the shape of our owl. Let's go into the ballpoint pen here. And the whole thing with drawing is that you get an idea of the shape of something before you put any detail in. There's really no point putting too much detail on something before you've got the shape right. And this technique is going to allow you to do that because it gives you the reference points that you need. Let's look at a larger subject here. And this one actually is one that I've painted previously. And when you've got two of something, two people, two objects, it really helps you to see the relationship between those two objects and the comparative sizes. So I'd be looking at a line along the bottom here. Although we've got the curve of this branch, the line between this point and this point is pretty straight. So we can start with a straight line there. Trying to make sure I just about fit it on camera. So we've got a straight line there, and then I'm looking at this bird here, and we've got an angle up here. I'm going to work slightly smaller than the photo so that it fits on the screen nicely. And then I've got my angle between the heads here, which is quite a steep angle. And then we go out and back in. And we're starting with a shape something around here. From there, I can start to get my proportions of the birds in. Think about this branch that they're on. And I can start to look at how those shapes interact with each other. And because I've got that top angle between the heads there, doesn't matter what size I do these lovebirds, I'm going to end up with the right proportions and the right relationships between them. And here we've got a nice arrangement. I think the beak on this one is a little bit too large, but if I'm working in pencil, I've got everything I need to start putting in more detail. So I've talked about how good this technique is for people. We're going to look now at a couple of photographs I've got of people dancing, because it's really when people are moving and there's a lot of foreshortening. and perspective going on that they become much harder to understand. So let me show you some examples. So I've got this photo here. I believe it's Kylie Minogue, and you can see she's bent forward. She's in a very, very strange position because she's dancing and singing. She's not standing upright, and so everything has become changed and elongated and foreshortened. We need to sort of make sense of this. So starting with a box around this can be really helpful. Now with figures, you also want to combine with my stick person method. I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this one, but the envelope technique is also a good place to start. So imagining that I'm using both techniques together, we're going to be looking at this line of the shoulders here. I really want to get this line of the shoulders and the waist here, and then I'll use the box technique to go round. So I'm going to start off getting sort of shoulders and waist here, which are much foreshortened. And then I'm going to be looking at enclosing in my box shape. Let's bring the bottom up a little here so you can see. Now, do you see how we've ended up with this sort of pyramid shape here? And that's because, as I said, there's foreshortening, so she's compressed this part of her body. It's also making her legs look longer. And so what we can do now is to start to get those shapes in. And you see that her neck has almost disappeared here, simply because she's so hunched forwards. And we can start thinking about where her limbs are. So figure drawing is quite tricky. As I said, I've got other videos on it, and the envelope technique is just one of the ways that we would start to draw this figure. And her hand is actually holding a microphone here. It's only a rough sketch, but we'll give her some hair nevertheless. And you can see straight away how getting these outside angles compared with a little bit of consideration of bone structure is going to get her positioned exactly where we need her on the paper. At this point in the video, can I ask you quickly just to press the thumbs up button, that like button for me if you're enjoying the content and getting some value from it. You may have noticed in this video that I'm not pausing to try and sell you vitamins or video games or t-shirts or anything else. So if you want to thank me for this content, giving it a like or sharing it with somebody who might find it useful is the way to go. So I've got two dancers next, and the relationship between the two of them is really quite interesting. So we've got this completely straight line up here. We've got a line between the heads, and then we've got the angles of the female dancer here up in the air. And all of this is going to be easy to plot with our envelope technique. I'll draw a little smaller this time, so I'll make sure the whole thing is on camera. I'm going to start with this line here because it's the longest line. Now, initially he looks pretty upright, which he is, but his head's tilted back, so we're going to start with a slight outwards angle like this. We'll have a look at his feet. We can pretty much come down and back up like this for his feet. Now I've got this angle between the dancer's toes here and another one coming up here, almost like a couple of angles to a curve. There's very much of a curved feeling here. So we'll go out and out again. Now we've got the angle in to the female dancer's head, which is above the man's. And then finally, we've got the angle between the two of them, which is quite steep, like this. So this is the shape that I'm left with. So let's get a rough idea of where things are going. So our man's head is out at an angle like this. And his body is down. He's got very wide sort of 70s style trousers on. I'm a very big fan of 70s fashion. We can look at where his arm comes here. So we're just looking at basic shapes here. So one thing that beginners do wrong is they'll start drawing something like this and they'll go into a lot of detail, put loads of details on the man's face, and then decide later on that he's actually in completely the wrong place. And that's never what you want to be faced with, because you've spent ages drawing something and then of course you find that it's completely wrong. And so with this technique, you can see there I drew her face much too big. Of course I can't erase because I'm using what we call in the UK a biro or a ballpoint pen. But this outside shape is going to allow us to start to make sense of where things are on the paper and the relationship between them. And here we can see we've got a good outline sketch, starting positions for our dancers. So after people, the time that I use this technique most often is for flowers. It's going to enable us to turn flowers in any direction to see how they really look. We're also going to combine this with finding the center point. That can be quite important when drawing flowers. I'll be showing you a couple of different types of flowers, as well as a painting that I am currently about to start myself. So let's look at some flowers. We've got different types of flowers. We've got a flower like this, which is just a bud. And then we've got flowers like this, which are many little florets on one shape. And then, of course, we've got open flowers and flowers where you can see the center. So let's think about these sort of flowers first. So with a flower like this, which I believe is a foxglove, you're looking at the overall shape and then placing things within it. So what we can do here is we can start to get an idea of the whole outline shape. In fact, I think we go out again up here of this flower. So you might think, first of all, well, it's wide here and it goes narrower, but doing this outline shape enables you to find square edges. Look how much in line these bits here are, and also here, although we've got some kind of going in. What this is going to enable you to do then is to really start finding where things are and where those lines are that sort of connect everything. It stops something like this with multiple flower heads just becoming bigger and bigger as you draw more and more of them on, because you've got this outside shape and that you know that everything kind of has to fit in there. So it's going to give you that much more natural look. And even if your little flower heads are not in exactly the same place as the ones you're drawing, it's still going to look very realistic and very natural, simply because you have this outline shape for it all. And we can see how everything has to get much smaller as it comes up the top, because otherwise it won't fit in to the shape that we've made. So this is going to help us to get our proportions correct and to get that sense of perspective that we need on a plant like this. Don't be afraid if they come out of the shape a little bit, because this is just a guideline, and of course with natural objects they're going to have a little bit more of a bumpy edge. I would also, with something like this, even before I had drawn that shape, I would probably make sure that I had got that stem coming in, because I know that that stem then goes through the whole of the flower, even though we can't see all of it, and that enables me to get all of the other elements into and start getting a really natural effect. With a single bud like this, we can use the same technique. So here I'd be thinking about getting that stem in and then looking at that outline shape and really where it fit. And again, I've then got a really nice guideline for putting all the elements of the plant in. And look how natural that looks now that we've got that outside shape correct. Because if you don't take the time to learn the outside shape, then you might look at something like this and think, well, it's very rounded and maybe it's a bit pointed at the top, and you could end up with the shape of it completely wrong. Let's look now at one that I'm actually painting, or about to start drawing and painting at the moment. So I'm going to be painting these magnolias soon, and look at this little bud down here. Look at the strange sort of shape it is. What I like to do with flowers like this is I like to find the outside shape and then the center point. Now, even if the center point is hidden like it is here, we still know where it is, because all of our petals need to come out from the center point, and that's important for this one here. So what I'll do is I'll find the outside shape of it, because without seeing the outside shape of it, I could be inclined just to almost draw, a circle, and it probably wouldn't look right at all. So I'm going to find what's going on here. We've got something that comes around like this. So we're ending up with this sort of shape, and the center of the flower is above, halfway up, and it's right over to the left. So we're going to place our center around here. Now, with all of that in mind, I can now start to take my flower petal shapes outwards. I'll have main petal shapes, but there also may be some smaller ones that are coming around the back here. So I could start getting all of those in. And this smaller petal here coming down, curving round. And finally that longer petal at the base. Again, the center line must come from the middle, even if we can't see all of it. And I'll be getting that middle in there eventually too, putting in any other outside petals. And you can see how we now construct our flower very easily because we've got that outside shape. It's going to add a lot of naturalness. It's going to stop our eyes overriding our brain and just thinking it's circular. If you're interested in a tutorial for this painting, I'm actually going to be adding it to a course I'm making next year. So I'm going to be doing a watercolour flower painting course next year. So that would be spring of 2024. And as part of the course, there'll be a full follow along tutorial of this flower painting here. You may see some snippets of it as well in upcoming YouTube videos. Next, let's look at how this technique can be applied to multiple different types of still life objects. So how can this envelope technique help us with something like this, which is very, very circular and has also got quite an extreme sort of perspective on it? Actually, it would fit into a very simple shape, wouldn't it? We can see that it's wider at the top than it is in the base. So let's draw ourselves a shape for this. Again, I'll draw it smaller so you can see I am actually going to curve that top line just because it is such a curved subject. And then we'll come down for the sides like this. And again, I'll curve in from here. I mean, that is an incredibly simple shape, isn't it? Now I'll be looking for how much this top circle takes up, how much of the height. Often one of the best places you can start to put details in is just to find the halfway point, and it's actually more than halfway down. So let's place that in. So from there, I'm able then to start making my drawing. Now I do have other videos about drawing ellipses. I'm actually thinking of doing a more in-depth one of this sort of subject as well, with lots of drawings of items that feature ellipses. So let me know if that's something that you would be interested in. And so straight away, just by getting that initial outline, we've immediately got a really good basis for our drawing. All we have to do now is place in a few flowers and maybe even a few champagne bubbles. So do let me know if you've come across this method before, if it's something that you use regularly. I find it really useful in my own work. On my channel, we're all about simple drawing techniques. And before you leave this video, don't forget to pop into the video description. You can download all sorts of free stuff there and get some free tutorials. I also have a full online comprehensive drawing course. It's going to take you into lots of different subjects in far more detail than I ever have time to do on YouTube. If you're not sure about online courses, I have some free ones too, so you can have a go at those first. But I do recommend my Complete Beginner's Drawing course. And if you've enjoyed this video and you're looking to improve your drawing, I've got another great drawing video coming up for you. You can watch that one right now.